All right, welcome to episode 9 of the BMX Commentator Podcast. I can't believe we're nearly in double figures. Apparently, there's a statistic that says anybody that gets over 9 episodes of a podcast is in something like the top 10 of the podcasts in the world, because most people don't make it to 10 podcasts. So I'm pretty pleased that we're very nearly there. But I'm more than excited to bring you episode 9 and what I would describe as an up-and-coming star in the coaching world. I think he's probably the best way to describe him. He's certainly been busy, both in BMX and out of BMX, and it's my pleasure to bring to the BMX Commentator Podcast, Connor Hedges. Connor, how are you?
Thank you for having me. I am all good. How about yourself?
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. Very well. As you know, we're recording this on Father's Day, so certainly it's been a busy day. So yeah, looking forward to just having a chat though and talking about BMX and more specifically strength and conditioning in BMX, which is kind of like the way we were going to go with it. So, I mean, I've watched you grow up, Connor, on the BMX tracks of the UK, doing your thing, and you moved up to Manchester and attended uni. But just give us a little bit of background on kind of like you and BMX and how you became a coach. Just take us on that journey for a few minutes.
So I started BMX because I didn't know how to ride a bike. So I hated bikes. I had my little Power Ranger bike with the old stabilizers on. Hated them. So my dad saw the 2008 Olympics, went, that's it, that'll do. Went down to the BMX track, crashed a couple of times, and then carried on. And it kicked off from there. Went through the normal kind of development, won a couple Brits, which was pretty cool as an amateur, and then started doing the old junior men, elite men at national level. Had a little heart episode as well, so I've got atrial fibrillation. So in one of my training days, I did some squats, and then my heart decided to beat out of control. Had to get it restarted with cheeky cardio version. So I think that's something that most people won't experience. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it kind of meant that I had to pause my BMX career racing wise and can't train as much. So I thought if I can't ride, I'd rather still be involved and kind of coach. And I thought, what about my journey into trying to get into professional BMX? What was missing? What could I potentially give back to the people that say I was in my position when I was younger? And it kind of kicked off from there. I made my own coaching brand, and then decided to help people out that didn't have the opportunities that I did, or perhaps didn't have the opportunities that others could afford. And it's gone quite well so far. And yeah, now I'm working for British Cycling and doing some strength conditioning work in the country with Manchester City and some private work as well. So it's kind of a plan A failed, but plan B's gone really well.
And sometimes that's not a bad thing either if plan B goes better than plan A, because
Absolutely.
sometimes you end up in a better place with plan B. So just go back to the university side of it for me, because I know you moved up here, didn't you? You did your university degree in Manchester. Tell us a bit about that, what you did and how that went.
So I still attend the University of Salford. So the idea of moving to Manchester kind of advertised itself to me. I was kind of attracted to it for the BMX and the job opportunities that were around. Obviously, you got the football and the National Cycling Centre there. I attended initially to do performance analysis work with like the idea of having a coaching background in BMX somewhere along the lines. Found it dead boring working on a computer. So I thought strength conditioning, the sort of coaching role, is the one for me. So I studied sports science as a bachelor's degree. I graduated last year with a first class, so pretty happy with that. And now I am on to my master's degree solely in strength conditioning, still with the University of Salford, just because the staff there are world class in what they do. So there's Professor Paul Comfort, who's given me a lot of guidance, who is on the board of what's called the National Strength and Conditioning Association. So to help and kind of be guided under him is pretty cool.
That sounds like a rad opportunity. That sounds like you know where you're going and you know what you're doing, which is always a great thing. So you mentioned working with British Cycling and Manchester City, and as cool elite sporting environments go, that's probably two of the biggest. So tell us what you're doing at both of those particular organisations.
So at Manchester City, I am a strength conditioning coach and sports scientist for the academy. So I work with players from under the age of 9 up to the 18s, kind of guided them through their strength conditioning journey, starting from the 9-year-olds. And we'll get onto it in a bit about how their structure goes, and all the way up to the 18s, and working more individually with them. And yeah, it's really, really good. So I do all of their workload tracking. So I make sure that their workloads are in the correct place when they're in season or in a high kind of frequency game week. I make sure that their workloads are correct, doing all their GPSs, RPEs, some sort of things like that, making sure that they're in the right spot, ready to perform, as long alongside doing their warm up, stuff like that. So if you watch the telly, and if you watch like the England game that will be on tonight, so we're recording this on the first game, and you'll see them, warming up on the pitch. That's kind of what I do, making sure that they're best prepped to give their best physical performance on the pitch. And with British Cycling, I am a consultant for the NSR BMX Foundation program. So for those that aren't in the UK scene, that's kind of the first major development step to kind of progress onto professional BMX. We've got what's called the RSR and development centres underneath that, but the NSR is the first kind of cohort that are taken under the wing of British Cycling, given programs and stuff like that to go on and progress themselves to hopefully be professional athletes. So I plan their strength conditioning remotely in the future, hopefully having a few personal in-person sessions as well, because I just got underway with that. So I've just missed all the camps and stuff to do in-person stuff. I do all their testing. So we'll have some force plates out, some proper nerdy stuff, looking at how they best fit and what they need to do to improve to be the best BMXer they can do, making sure they're in the right place at the right time in terms of their physical maturation and their competencies in the gym as well. And I guess that's kind of it, really. There's a little bit more, but, the basics are there.
Okay. Well, talk about the similarities, but also the differences as well between a footballer and a BMXer in terms of the strength and conditioning. Is there a lot of stuff that's similar? Are there commonalities between the two, or do they actually kind of almost have two completely different ways of doing things? I'd love to know a bit more about that.
So first and foremost, BMXers are tenfold stronger, absolutely tenfold stronger. So you could have a BMXer that has never been in the gym before, and hypothetically, if you put them underneath a bar or whatever, they would lift 10 times more weight, 100%. For football, they're more based on injury prevention and slowly building them up. So especially at a younger age, they're more focused on kind of making sure that they're ready to have high intensity plays in the game in the future, kind of making sure that their hamstrings are basically bulletproof. In terms of their S&C when they get older, they're similar in terms of the basic fundamentals. So they always go through the general sort of movements and stuff like that, but it's more on pitch as well. So you focus on more form-based stuff in terms of sprinting, change direction, stuff like that. Whereas with BMX, it's kind of just in gym. You do dynamic warm-ups and stuff like that with key focus, but with football, they're kind of spread between the gym and on pitch. BMX are more force-based. They don't really do any what's called eccentric stuff, or you kind of add it in, but it's not a main priority focus. So eccentric is kind of any big braking. So say if you did a jump and you land, when you have to kind of stop yourself going down or whatever, that's kind of what eccentric is, where your muscles stretch and hopefully break you when you come to a full stop or whatever. Whereas football, that's where the biggest injuries lay. So that's a lot of the focus on them as well. BMX is kind of a more concentric sport where we only kind of push with our, quads and stuff like that. So that's kind of the main focus point that we're on.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks for clarifying that. That's certainly given me an idea of the differences between the two, which is what I was after. So I want to come into like strength and conditioning, I suppose, as a kind of an area where I kind of look at Instagram. Let's take Instagram as an example, and you see like Johnny McRad Pro, pick a rider, any rider, and he posts an Instagram reel, shall we say, or a video of his training, or there'll be something on YouTube, and they'll be doing like big squats and overspeed sprints, and they just show all this stuff that looks really glamorous. And I know that a lot of riders are influenced by what they see on social media. With regard to strength and conditioning, like when the teenagers and that kind of stuff, I suppose is probably the best way to describe it. Like your younger riders coming into that phase where, they're almost picking a sport to go into. What are the kind of things that they should understand? What are the myths around strength and conditioning for these athletes? Because they look on Instagram, they see what they see, they go, I want to do that, and then they're straight down the gym, like almost killing themselves under a squat rack. And I would like you to kind of just dispel some myths about what they see on Instagram in regards to training.
I think like the biggest question I always get is, do they it's kind of based from parents, to be fair, where they see like, their kids look at the gym and go, I need to go to the gym to get better, and the parents go, no, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to stop your growth, you're going to limit your growth. And it's not entirely true. So it's the question of, is my child ready to lift weights? And that isn't the question. The question shouldn't be, is my child ready to lift weights? It should be, is my child ready to produce the same amount of force? So let's say, for instance, you go on Instagram and you see someone squatting on their back, their body weight. That is the same amount of force they're producing as someone doing a single leg squat. So if I was to do my body weight on the back or on my back, doing a barbell back squat or whatever, I'm producing the same amount of force in both legs as I would doing a body weight pistol squat. So that's literally one leg holding on to my shoulders or whatever, other leg in the air, squatting up and down. That is the exact same force being produced. And if you say to a parent or whatever, would you rather your child do that body weight back squat, or that back squat, with that amount of weight on, or that single leg squat, they go that single leg squat all the time, wouldn't they? But it's the exact same force. I think it's the idea that children are going to get themselves injured or hinder their growth in that environment that kind of puts them off. It's not entirely true at all. So there's been plentiful of studies that actually show that, going into a weightlifting environment, their growth is actually more enhanced. They're less likely to get injured if they have proper, correct training in that environment. They're less likely to get cardiovascular diseases. They actually have performance enhancement as well from doing those sort of things. They're more likely to be more mobile and fitter when they get older as well. And, it's more fun to do those types of things. So it's a good environment to be in as long as you have the correct training to go into. So it's the myth of being scared to hop into those environments, which I think kind of puts weightlifting down as a dangerous sport. There's been a lot of studies that kind of show that weightlifting, I believe it was in 100 hours worth of sport, weightlifting, it was a 0.00013% of people getting injured or chance of injury. Whereas in rugby, for instance, if you were to do rugby for 100 hours, you had a 0.8% chance of likelihood of getting an injury. No, 0.8% of people, or 0.8 people were to get an injury. So that's quite an interesting statistic. You're more likely to get injured doing, your general sports and jumping off of stuff, as young children do, than to go into that weightlifting environment.
Right. Okay. So it's more dangerous to climb trees and jump out of them than it is to nip down the gym and lift a few weights.
Exactly.
So, but it's amazing that you used rugby as a kind of a comparison, because I played schoolboy rugby league as well, and I can definitely attest to the fact that we got smashed around a little bit between the ages of like 13 and 16, and there were bumps and bruises aplenty. But yeah, that's another story for another day. So with regards to that, so let's say you've got a parent out there who kind of goes, right, you've seen all this stuff on Instagram, you're looking at the trainer, you go, I want the best for my kid. So they'll do some coaching sessions kind of at the local track or whatever. But then what they'll also do is they might nip down to their local gym and engage the services of a personal trainer. So they may think that they are doing the right thing, but what is the difference between having a strength and conditioning coach and having a personal trainer?
So personal trainers are more based upon fitness. You can 100% get a personal trainer that has education within S&C and sports science. It is definitely doable. All that information is out there. But for a strength conditioning coach, it's more tailored to being sports specific and making sure that, workload is monitored, your condition, so your energy. The conditioning in S&C kind of is based around your energy usage. So if you think about doing that 30 to 40 second lap or whatever, it's making sure that you have that amount of energy in you, making sure that the tank is, fueled up, ready to have that full effort. That's kind of put in there, rather than a personal trainer kind of tends to move away from that a little bit in terms of just general fitness, whereas S&C kind of goes into that sports science mode of being more specific. There's more what's called periodization involved in S&C, and we're kind of tailoring plans to make sure that people are ready for their important races during the year. So we structure a plan that kind of is linear or blocked linear into, we're doing this at this certain time of the year to make sure we can prepare ourselves to be the best possible rider we can be come, let's say, the British Championships or whatever. So everything, we look back at what the months leading up to that is and kind of make sure that things are in stepping stone sort of fashion to make sure that we are ready for that big race. Whereas a personal trainer kind of typically goes from session to session. But it's not to say that personal trainers cannot, go into that S&C role. I know plenty of personal trainers that have some sort of education within S&C and they do it really, really well. But it's kind of the sports science background of the testing, retesting, having that education of sports science and what goes on involved in that periodization and working solely with athletes. That is kind of the main difference between personal trainers. I think to sum it all up, it is the difference between working specifically with athletes and tailoring to them and their specific demands, and kind of the general population. That is the main difference between them.
Right. Okay. So that kind of goes back to the point we were talking about earlier about the difference between football and BMX. And, your standard personal trainer in a gym might have, a couple of footballers on his books or whatever it might be. And then you bring a BMXer in and he's got an idea of what goes on, but isn't quite like fully on board with it and the demands of it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So let's say a parent wanted to kind of go the extra mile for their rider and kind of get them into a strength and conditioning scenario, shall we say. What kind of age do you think that should start and how do you think that should look?
So S&C can kind of start at any age. Like we said, like it's the biggest myth out there that they don't need, or it's bad for them to kind of go through that. S&C can start at any age. It just depends on you kind of thinking about a rider's growth and maturation and kind of matching their S&C to that. So if you think about, middle childhood to early adolescence, so I'm talking around about 7 to, 12, whatever, it's not necessarily thinking about the force that we want to produce or kind of getting them super duper strong. It's kind of focusing on their mobility exercises, making sure that neurologically these guys are ready to go into the gym when they start to hit their adolescent years or post-adolescent years. It's more functional movement based, making sure that they're ready to take that next step. thinking about, mobility, agility, speed, stuff like that, general physical training, rather than becoming too sport specific and on performance programs and stuff like that.
Yeah, so developing that foundation, in other words. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
They can still get, if you think about little Johnny or whatever, who's, 12 years old or whatever, they can still get some sort of performance characteristics from it. Like you will, if you're stronger, you will get quicker, but you don't need to be under a bar or whatever. You got to think of it kind of like an S&C journey as being or learning how to drive a car. So, you've got to have so many lessons in order to drive a car to be ready to go onto the road. Whereas in S&C, you've got to have different S&C lessons to be ready to then go into that environment to become a performance athlete or whatever, or start to lift weights, on your own and get a program. Those lessons obviously will look different depending on your age, your, physical maturation, and also your cognitive ability as well. So how mature you are in terms of learning different skills as well. So it's kind of they're similar in terms of that journey. You've got to make sure that you are ready to step into that environment, and that's what S&C coaches kind of do from that young age.
Okay, because I've certainly got a 12, nearly 13-year-old who's absolutely desperate to get in the gym and start slinging a few weights around. He would go like every day if I'd let him. So yeah, it's certainly something that's on my radar at the moment. So with regards to, I mean, we've spoken about strength and conditioning, and most of the kind of conversation so far has been around strength, so lifting and being in the gym. There's the C side of S&C, conditioning. How does conditioning work for BMX? Because in my head, when I hear the word conditioning, I think about having enough in the tank to do multiple full laps over the course of a day and being able to repeat that effort. Is that something that sounds about right, or does it have a slightly different definition?
Yeah, absolutely. So conditioning can be kind of, segregated into different parts. Like you said, having that tank or that energy tank full is definitely a part of that, making sure that, the energy system that you'll be using. So BMXers use what's called the ATP PC system, which I won't describe what the word is because it is really long. But it's about kind of like your energy currency. So imagine you're at the shop or whatever, you want to buy a little bit of energy, that's kind of how it works in our body. You've got to have, the money to buy energy out of that. So it's making sure that we've got the funds to spend to keep having that energy keeping going. We also use anaerobic energy. So, when you're at the end of the lap and, you're breathing super hard, that's because you've kind of used very limited oxygen when you're going around the lap. You don't have enough time to, breathe in enough air to keep your energy going. So it's about tailoring to those energy systems that we use to make sure that we're topped up, ready to do that lap again. It's also kind of away from that energy system base and focusing on, what sort of injuries or sport-specific areas BMX needs to have covered. So if you think about BMXers, what sort of injuries do you think BMXers will have? What's the most common injury you hear a BMXer getting all the time? Say they've crashed in the corner. What's the thing they break the most?
Collarbones, I would say.
That's it. Yeah. So, as a wise man once said, weak things break. So we make it stronger. So that's why a lot of BMXers, we kind of want a little bit bigger shoulders. We're not too big that we weigh ourselves down. But it's about that tailoring to BMX, making sure that we're less likely to get injured and ready to step into that environment. And if we do have a fall or whatever, we're not going to snap ourselves in half. You think about mobility as well. Like, I remember having conversations with people and they tell me, oh, how did you crash like that and you didn't get injured or whatever? You literally folded like a pretzel. And it's just the mobility. If your body can go through that range of motion and be conditioned to be in that range of motion, not saying we're practicing for a crash, but you're less likely to get injured. It's making sure that you are, prepped to eventually, it will happen. You will go through that, but having that injury prevention and confidence that, I might crash or whatever, but I'm less likely to get injured because of that, that's that kind of conditioning side, making you prepped for BMX specifically.
Right. Okay. So having the energy to do multiple full laps and also having the flexibility, the mobility, and the strength to not get injured. Those are the two things that we discussed. That sounds like a dream for an older cruiser rider. That
That's the one.
knowing what to do in the event of a crash. Because I mean, I've said on multiple occasions that, like, for the older guys especially, it's not even about like having the strength and the speed from the gate to the first turn, although there's a big chunk of that. For me, it was always like, what are they like at the end of the lap when they're going down the last straight at Manchester, for instance, and the legs are full of lactic acid? And when they've done that 5 times and it comes to the main event, for me, it was the person who had the most left in the tank that was probably in the better position.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the older cruiser guys have all kind of like pricked up their ears at that point and gone, oh,
it's
right,
that
okay.
understanding as well, like, of how we kind of manage that on race day as well. How do we, top up those energy systems? So, like, it's a key point actually that people don't do. They kind of do their full lap and then go sit in their chair or whatever. You see, what's it? The kind of the theme that's going around at the moment is everyone laughing at long seat posts, and recovery. But it's a big, big important thing. People that take their recovery seriously or their warm up seriously do perform better. It's also how we top up that fuel. So we go back to thinking about that energy system that we use, the anaerobic energy system. If we can't use oxygen, we use carbohydrates. So how do we, during the race day, top that up? We eat carbs. We want carbs that come in and basically take effect immediately and keep our, energy level topped up. If we don't prepare in advance for that, our tank will get low very quickly. That's what we got to be mindful of. So S&C and sports science and nutritional preparation, it goes months and weeks in advance with carbo loading to make sure that we can go into an event and know, like, we've done the best prep possible to help our energy system, be topped up. Our energy tank is full, ready for that event. So when it does slightly go down, we can also top it up on the day to make sure we're ready for the next race.
Cool. Excellent. So, oh God, carball loading as well. It's sounding like a cruiser rider's dream, this podcast. It really is. So yeah, you've certainly thrown a few things into the mix there that, give people food for thought, if you'll pardon the pun. So with regards to actual science within BMX and how to integrate it, how does that look for you as a coach? How do you integrate the science into the BMX side of things?
So, unfortunately, there is quite. I had a conversation actually with Adam Brazil at Cumbernauld. So he's got a PhD. He does sports science background, whatever. He's got that BMX background as well. There's not a lot of sports science research within BMX, so unfortunately, it is quite limited in scope. But we do. I've done a little bit of research or produced a little bit of research on BMX regarding gate starts, etc. But you've got to look at the research base, what's been proven, what's had correlations, so what's been related to BMX performance. And we kind of integrate whatever has come out on top into the training. So, for example, there's been studies, it's really, really basic stuff that, everyone knows now, but it's because of that sports science background that people know. Higher power, okay, so higher absolute power quantities. So imagine you do that watt bike sprint or whatever. The most power you have, the more likely you are to have a quicker gate start. Okay, it's pretty simple. But then on the flip side, the higher relative power that you have. So say you had a 1,800 watts 6-second sprint, or that was your max power. Okay, and someone else had a 2,000 watt sprint. The person with the 2,000 watt sprint will probably be, or more likely to have, a better start. But the person who might have been a lower power output but has a higher relative power, so in regards to how much power they produced, and they were a lighter body weight, so they might have a 20.2 watts per kilo. they're more likely to have a better lap time. So it's that balance of trying to find that sweet spot. Obviously, you've got your technique and, race situations that are involved in that, but it's integrating those things that have been proven within literature, putting them into work within S&C or BMX training, and making sure that we can, maximize what's been found and put that into our own training. One of the best studies that have been out there is by Lee Rylands, I believe. And it's very good stuff to kind of make sure that we're on the right path. But the people in World Cups, that your order of the race, so say you got the whole shot in the race, you're more likely to win the race. It sounds really basic, but it's to make sure that we've got the emphasis of having a good gate start in BMX. And, looking back at the research, we go, okay, so this person has proven that having a good gate start, being first to that corner, you're more likely to win. So how do we get a good gate start? What's correlated to making a good gate start? Absolute power. Okay, so how do we now have or create better absolute power? We must produce force, which is strength, or the ability to apply strength in a quicker time. And then from that point there, that's where you kind of make your training plan. It's quite complicated. I've kind of waffled through that a little bit, but that's kind of how the thought process goes with how we make a training plan to make sure that we can boost our athletes' potential to win, essentially.
Okay. Because what you were saying before about relative power and that kind of thing, and Sunday, you might not have the best gate start. The thing that immediately sprang to mind for me then was Nick Kimmon's first straight, because he never seems to be the first guy out. But, once he gets to the bottom of that hill and starts to he seems to find another gear, doesn't he? Especially on a long first straight like Papendal or somewhere like that. So how do you see that compared to somebody like, I don't know, a Yoris or something like that, who always seems to be out and thereabouts and like remains exactly the same as well? Romain Mayu, he's out early, leads into the first turn, and there's a slight differential, I suppose you would describe, in the way they handle that first straight. Is that the kind of thing that you were referring to, or am I on the wrong track there?
No, that's completely correct. Like that's kind of the difference between that absolute and relative. So if you had, let's say you had two Kimmons, right? One weighed more, one was 90 kg, one was 85 kg. The one that was 90 kg was able to produce more force. The one that was 85 produced less force, but had a higher relative power output. So they produced more for their weight. The person who had the most absolute might get to the first corner first, but the person with the relative will catch up to them by the end if they did the exact same lap. In theory, that is.
In theory, right. Okay. I kind of understand where you're coming from with that, but it's very interesting to kind of get your take on it, which is quite cool. Do you have any kind of strength and conditioning recommendations for BMX racing? So let's say there's, you've got somebody out there who wants to take their first steps into strength and conditioning. What do you think they should really focus on first and foremost?
So say I have never been in the gym before. What I would do is I'd learn the basic fundamental movements off by heart, body weight, and I know exactly what to do with it. So learn your squat patterns. Learn how to. It's weird, but learn how to jump properly. Learn what you need to do to jump. There's a lot of people that don't actually know how to jump high. Learn those fundamental movements before you put any weight on your back. Make it fun as well. You don't need to do. If I was a younger child, a 10-year-old, for instance, and someone made me do 10 sets of squats or whatever, it would be dead boring. It'd be the same thing all the time. If you put like a little challenge in there, so let's say I had a ball and a cone or whatever to kind of balance on my head or whatever as I was doing a squat, it's 10 times more fun, and I'm learning neurologically how I can squat properly in the correct form. That's kind of what I would focus on as a youth athlete. For an older athlete, it would definitely be learning or trying to put in as much ballistic exercises as you can alongside strength work. So ballistic, your stuff like jumping, whatever, trying to make it more concentric based, so more pushing based. So a really good exercise that I love to give people all the time are seated box jumps, or rocket jumps, something where you are purely pushing as high or pushing as much force as you can, jumping in the air, then landing. There's no dipping, no driving or whatever. If you think about BMX, we just push on the pedals. So sit down on a box, rock backwards. This is a rocket jump. Rock backwards, slap your feet on the floor and jump as high as you can. That is a ballistic concentric based exercise. Always do them before you do any heavy lifting. You want to make sure that you are high energy and best prepped, ready to do your top efforts in those sort of exercises, and then learn your basic fundamental movements of maybe a squat and a deadlift. Deadlifts have kind of been highly correlated to BMX, so highly specific to BMX in terms of their concentric based movements. You just push off the floor and then drop back down again. So deadlifts and squats are probably the main one. You don't need to go too specific with BMX. The basic movements work as long as you program them correctly. So strength and power based exercises are really, really key.
Okay, can I just clarify a couple of things there as well, Connor? When you say
Yes.
jumping movements, so you're referring to more plyometric based movements, is that right?
Yeah, so there is a difference actually. Like this, so if you ask any strength and conditioning coach, like plyometric and ballistic exercises, there's a big difference. So plyometric refers to, this is proper going into nerdy stuff, and
No, I like nerdy stuff. Keep going.
So plyometric stuff refers to how what's called the stretch shortening cycle, which is in your knees. So when you go to a doctor's and they get that little hammer out and they bash your knee and then it flicks up.
Yeah.
It's a reflex, isn't it?
Right.
That's
Okay.
plyometric. So you've got to kind of initiate what's called the SSC, the stretch shortening cycle, in your tendons, where your tendons and muscles stretch rapidly, that they go, hold on a second, what's going on, and fire up. So things with low contact time on the ground, I'll take this slowly, but low contact time on the ground, where you're on and off the ground as quick as you can, is plyometric. So things like drop jumps, where you hop off of a box, touch the ground and get off of it in less than 0.25 seconds, is plyometric. Ballistic exercise is kind of any jumping or weighted jumping movements, explosive movements that you come off of the ground with or have no clear ending. A squat or whatever has a clear stop start. A jump, you jump in the air and that's it, you've gone off the ground. So ballistic is your jumping explosive movements. Plyometric is your short contact times. So that's a little bit of a sports science guy going, oh, that's not plyometric. You know what I mean? But yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do was I kind of wanted to differentiate between the two, because again, I'm going to go back to Instagram for this. You see so much stuff on there that and people get shiny objects in Joe and they go, oh, Joe, that looks really good. That'll make me really fast. And you kind of, if you can say, right, you need to do, for example, ballistic movements, before you do your lifting or whatever it might be, then that will give people kind of a clearer guide. So that was kind of what I wanted to do. So I really wanted to kind of clear up a few myths there, if you know what I mean. I mean, God, there's probably about a billion different ways we could go with that. And it might be worth that we do at some point, Connor, a Q&A where we get people to send questions in and you can answer them. I think that would be a really good thing as well. So I'm just thinking out loud whilst we're talking.
Yeah.
So
say someone's fairly experienced in their gym work and they want to train more BMX based. So they've gone to the gym, they do the normal strength, but they're like, I don't know what to do during the day. I do my my bro split. So a lot of the riders at Manchester, when I came in, they were going, oh yeah, I do me bro split of back tries and thighs and all that malarkey. They're bodybuilders. So my best kind of advice for how to structure your gym session is quite simple. So start off jumping, then do what's called a compound exercise, where you do your main body lift, so your squat, your deadlift, stuff, something like that. Then go to a single leg, something like a reverse lunge, a normal lunge, or Bulgarian split squat if you really want to tire yourself out, go to hell with your S&C. And then you do your arms, push, pull, and then finish off with core. That is a very basic structure that will work for a BMX athlete. It's a very simple structure that people can just use and kind of, utilize and copy for themselves and design their own S&C plan for themselves at home. If you don't have access to an S&C coach, if you do it in that order, you won't go too far wrong. As long as you're not doing, if you're an older rider, and you want to perform well, as long as you're not doing tons and tons and tons of reps, and you're getting stronger by doing strength repetitions, so maybe 5 sets of 5 or whatever. This is for more of an older rider again, and you're trying to push that force fast, you won't go too far wrong.
Okay, I can hear the cruiser guys scribbling notes as we speak. So yeah, I think you've developed you've kind of dropped a serious bit of science there, and they're gonna take that and run with it. So yeah, that's a really great thing to have. So obviously we've done something for the older guys. What about the younger kids? Let's say Dad just wants to take little Johnny into the garden, do a few bits like twice a week, just to give him that little bit of a start. What would you recommend?
It sounds funny, but for younger riders that are like between 8 and 12, make them crawl, roll, and move in weird ways. That is literally it. Your mobility will thank you. Your core control will thank you. Neurologically, if you get them to squat underneath something really super duper low and move underneath it or whatever, say you got a pole and you made them squat, you're squatting, you've got to get up, and you've got that mobility in there as well. You're making them control their movement without realizing it. You don't need to be dead set boring and go, right, you must do 5 sets of 5 squats, go now. Okay, you can tailor or make your athlete stronger by having fun, which is the biggest main thing. So if I go back to what I do within football, that is kind of the main thing we do when they are younger, even within BMX as well. I know there's not like a kind of a BMX specific thing for younger athletes, but it wouldn't look too much different. So making sure that they can move, jump, run, do stuff, play different sports where different movements are utilized, and they will get so much better. I was asked a question the other day about a certain rider and why he was so quick in comparison to the rest. And I genuinely said it's because he does other sports. He does other sports where he runs, he jumps, he moves in different ways. He has challenges where he's got to balance stuff and do different movements and complete challenges. There's like stepping stone kind of jumps where he's got to jump from one pad to another pad to another pad. He's having fun and doing S&C without realizing it at all. So have fun when you're doing it, and training isn't boring.
Right. Okay, that's good. So kids who are out there and playing football and rugby at school seem to be doing kind of the right thing. So
Yeah.
No, that's a really interesting approach to it. So yeah, there's no reason why a kid has to be all BMX all the time. If they've got another partner sport, as I call it, it's helping with the strength and conditioning, but also I think most importantly, it stops them burning out and getting bored.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I know people that have quit BMX or quit other sports to solely focus on BMX or whatever. I understand from a financial point of view, having like a private sport team, whatever. But people that have come to me and said, "Oh yeah, he's been told not to do this in PE because he's focusing on his BMX." I think that's it's really detrimental to a athlete's development, and even just a normal child's development. If they don't do other sports, they don't understand those patterns. And also, it's less fun for them to do as well.
Okay, cool, fantastic. That's awesome piece of advice there, I think, for BMX parents. So, like you say, sometimes a kid wants to focus on BMX solely and not do anything else. So, but I think if you've got the opportunity to play other sports, I honestly think you should take it. So yeah, you kind of reinforce what was already in my mind. So I think before we wrap this up, Connor, what would you say would be the single biggest kind of lever that a BMX parent can pull to help their athletes? What would you say, if you could help your rider do one thing, what do you think it should be?
In terms of S&C, what could they do?
In terms of S&C or training for BMX, if you said to your kind of your parents who were there at a session on a Wednesday, if you said, if you can do this one thing for your rider, what do you think it should be? Or is that too broad a spectrum of a question?
So if they said to me, like, what could I do in terms of, physical development at home, what could they do? It is literally jump around, have fun, jump around, have fun. You produce force quickly, and you're jumping high, do whatever, crawl, roll, do your mobility exercises. You don't need to go into the gym to, get stronger. Try different things. Can you squat on one leg? If you can squat on one leg, I'll be over the moon with you. So I had a rider today show me that they could do what's called a dragon squat. Google a dragon squat. This girl, I'm gonna shout her out. Emily Eaton managed to do a dragon squat today, which is a pistol squat, but your leg goes behind you, and she managed to get it all the way down to the floor and all the way back up again. So no weightlifting was involved, and look how fast she is. So she can do that on one leg. So try different things. Get into squat, jump up and down, roll, crawl, go underneath stuff. That is it. For a youth athlete, have fun and do different cool movements. Simple as that.
Okay, fantastic. I can hear the hammers and saws coming out now as parents are building assault courses in the garden for the 5-year-olds. But yeah, so cool, brilliant. That sounds like an amazing point to wrap it up, Connor. Before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find you on social media, your coaching, all that kind of stuff. If they've got more questions and they want to speak to you, how do they get in touch?
Absolutely. So I've got my personal account, which is Connor Hedges _ on Instagram. And for my coaching, which has loads of different advices on it in terms of BMX on bike and off bike, it is CH Coaching and Performance on Instagram and Facebook.
Phenomenal. Connor, thank you so much. If you are up for a part 2, a Q&A, and I get plenty of questions, which I'm assuming I will after this, are you up for coming on again at some point?
100%.
Okay, brilliant. Right, well, we'll leave it there. Connor Hedges, thank you so much for coming on the BMX Commentator Podcast. I'm sure our paths are going to cross next weekend at the Manchester National, and I'm sure we can go into depth a little bit further and work out what we're going to do for that part 2. But again, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
Okay, mate. Have a good evening and enjoy the football.
Cheers. Bye.
Right.